our presentation on the phylum Nemertea. Here's a quick table of contents for studying and to speed through the video. Okay, so the main characteristics of the phylum, are they are known as ribbon worms or proboscis worms. Those are common names. They are monophyletic with around 1,300 species. They are slim and patterned similar to other worm phylums. They are bilaterally symmetrical. They are unsegmented, unlike other worms. And they are coelomates, which means they have a body cavity with organized tissue to organize their organs. Their main feature is a proboscis, which is this white-like structure here. We'll get into it a bit later. They are all ciliated. They have tiny cilia along their body to move. They move slowly. They are mostly marine, and they are mostly predators, and they do display sexual dimorphism. Tissue level organization. I'm sorry I could not find a good picture of it, but they are triploblastic. They have no cuticle on their endoderm, but it is a ciliated one. They have the mesoderm produces rhabdites, which are rod-like structures, and they are discharged into the mucus secretions, which forms the mucus that they glide on. They also do have muscles that vary by the class they are in. Their bodies, they can range from different sizes. They can be very long to very short. They can be very wide. They can be very thin. They are able to stretch their body if they feel disturbed up to 300%. There is only one species that is segmented, which is right here. Sorry, I struggle to pronounce this. And their coelom and body wall are not segmented. They do have bilateral symmetry. They are mostly flat and dorsoventrally. There are a few species that are cylindrical. Their mouth would be on the underside. This is a top view perspective, but it would be on the underside here. Their organs run below just the midline, except for the rhynchocoel cavity, which is a bit above the midline, and it's where it hosts the proboscis, which is the creature's defining feature. Their anus is near the tip of their tail, their posterior end, and yeah. Body systems, they do have a nervous system, circulatory system as well. They mostly run longitudinally. There are a few that are crosswise or latitudinally. They do have a type of blood, but not exactly blood, because they do gas exchange through their skin. But it is a circulatory fluid, mostly colorless. A few species have yellow, orange, green, or red colored one though. They do have eyes near the front. It comes in a pair. They do have chemoreceptors, and they have the protonphrydia to excrete waste, which is basically cilia within their gut to create a current to remove the waste. Body system, they have a well-developed digestive system, and the main feature again, the proboscis, which defines this phylum. This is an example of one. This is a branched one, in fact. As mentioned earlier, it has its own specific cavity that it rests in. When it shoots out, it actually everts, which means it's inside out, and it can stretch very far, up to 30 times the inactive length, and it's used mostly for feeding. They all move generally slowly. They use the external cilia as mentioned. Here's an example in this video. And they do produce slime and mucus to move. Some larger species do also muscular waves or dorsal-ventral undulations, aka the worm movement. That's just an example of their movement. Oops, sorry. And their ecology, they're mostly bottom-dwelling and marine species. There are a few freshwater and terrestrial ones. They are mostly carnivores, and they do feed on their prey, annelids, clams, crustaceans. A few filter feed or scavenge, and can even have different kinds of relationships with hosts. A few are parasitic. What's very common is a commensal relationship with mollusks, where they basically live around the mollusks who create currents for filter feeding, and they share in that filter feeding without harming the mollusk.
Moving on from ecology, we're going to talk about the two major classes of the phylum Nemertea. So the main synapomorphies, the main differences between the Anopla and Enopla are the rancoceal and aversival proboscis. So the class Anopla, also known as unarmed, have a separate orifice for their rancoceal. It's this top diagram. So this is the pore, and then this is the mouth. Again, two separate changers, one for the mouth and then one for the rancoceal. The class Enopla, also known as armed, have a shared orifice with their proboscis. So the mouth and the proboscis are both in the same location. Again, the Enopla are known as armed and the Anopla unarmed because the Enopla have a stylet on the end of their proboscis. So the proboscis is sort of like a tube-like structure that extends from the mouth, and then the Enopla stab their victim and inject toxic secretions, versus the Anopla who wrap their proboscis around their prey. Now, they both have toxic secretions, except that the unarmed is sort of sticky and again wraps around their prey like a boa, and the Enopla, the armed, use their little stylet to stab the prey and inject the toxins to immobilize them. They tend to swallow their victim whole, or sometimes there's also digestive juices secreted that are injected into the prey, and they just sort of suck up the tissues. There's also a difference in how they approach their prey. So the armed attack after contact versus the unarmed who attack prey within their range. So what does it eat? They hunt annelid, clams, crustaceans. Some have even successfully eaten spiders. They're not really selective of their prey. They just sort of prey that they can get their hands on. The unarmed, the Anopla, detect prey within their range and then attack. And the other one, the armed, after contact. So how do they sense that? Well, they both have chemoreceptors to smell, ocelli to detect light. The ocelli aren't able to form a full image, but they are able to see light and then detect their prey that way. They also have small pits in their epidermis that are thought to be sensors. Not all of them are carnivorous. Some absorb food through their skins. They have long, slim bodies with more surface area, so obviously that's an advantage. There's also suspension feeding in the order Bdellonemertea. They're symbiotic. They have a proboscis, no stylet, but they use suckers to attach themselves to bivalves. I believe this was mentioned previously, the commensal relationship with mollusks. The well, I guess you'll see that they're able to sense their prey and then use their, there you go, proboscis to wrap around their victim. And then here's another example of predation. So the proboscis extends enough to expose the stylet. Again, they have calcareous barbs, or if not, they stab their prey to inject it with toxins. The proboscis is used to swallow the prey whole, or once it's a little bit knocked out, you could just suck it right into your mouth and eat it whole. In terms of reproduction, sexes are separate, and then all freshwater species are hermaphroditic. They develop temporary gonads and then gonadogs, and fertilize externally by shedding their eggs into the water. Sometimes they lay them in a burrow, and then one species, I believe at least one, wraps them in a little cocoon, and then they burst out of the cocoon later on as a way of sort of protecting it. Internal fertilization is also seen, viviparity, where the embryos grow in the female's body. This relates the most to the flatworms because they're also flattened dorsal ventrally. They use suckers to attach to the host, as we've seen before. They also exhibit parasitic and commensal relationships. They're found in almost the same exact habitats. And then the proboscis and stylet are similar to nematocytes and tentacles.